Are we doing headphones now? We're doing headphones now. This is the Soundcore Q45, and it's not perfect, but I guarantee you it's worth a lot more than you're about to pay for it. Now, if you'd given me this and said it costed about $300 or a little more, I'd have believed you. I wouldn't have been happy about it, but I would have believed you because from a build quality point of view, this thing is premium. The seams, the edges, the materials used, everything is properly premium and in my opinion goes well up against things that are around the $300 price category. Except it's $150. That is wild. But you can be all the premium you want. How do you actually feel on the head? First of all, you notice that they use this lovely memory foam material covered in this leatherette, and that's used for both the ear cups and the foam below the headband. The ear cups themselves are both wide enough and deep enough that, in my opinion, most sizes and shapes of ears will be catered to. Now, they do have some swivel action going on. They swivel inwards and outwards like so, but not in the vertical axis, and I think that is a little bit of a downside because that is particularly important to providing a good seal. Now you can circumvent this by actually just adjusting the headphone height mechanism, because when you adjust the height, you actually end up, if you shorten the height, then you end up curving that ear cup inwards and providing yourself a better seal. There's two downsides to that though. Number one, you get a lot of clamp force. It's not the end of the world, but you do feel it for longer listening sessions. And number two, this headband is a little bit on the narrow side, and I can't help but feel that if they just made this headband a little wider, well, the pressure would have been distributed a little bit better over the head and would have been a little bit more comfortable. And for these two reasons together, long listening sessions had me wanting to readjust this every now and then. But now you've bought this, you've got it on your noggin, what can you do with it? Well, it comes with an app and it comes with a slew of features. Not too many, but I think just enough. Now, the app that comes with it, the Soundcore app, is really nice. It's clean, it's well made, it's a beauty to use. But before you do anything else, you need to do two things. Number one, do the firmware update. No, honestly, before the firmware update, the sound quality is, for lack of a better term, atrocious. After the firmware update, well, there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to unpack, but I will say it improves significantly. The other thing you have to do is you have to make a choice between LDAC and multipoint. Yes, it has both of those and neither of them come activated out of the box. I prefer LDAC over multipoint. I don't use multipoint very much, but I tried both of them and both worked flawlessly. LDAC on full strength 900 kbps, not a single drop, not a single signal cutout happened in my 1 week of usage, and that's on full strength LDAC. It's not something you see every day. And on the other hand, multipoint, seamless, absolutely instantaneous switching between my MacBook Pro and my Pixel 6. So either ways you cut it, whichever choice you make, this seems to deliver with proper quality. Now, once you're done with all that, you get back to the front page of the app and you realize, well, there's not that much there. You can switch between ANC modes and there's custom noise cancelling. Again, we'll cover all this in the sound quality section in just a second. But before that, the most interesting thing in my opinion is, well, it's not the control scheme. This doesn't support touch controls, by the way, only button controls. And I found the buttons to be a little bit on the narrow side, but you do get used to them. It's not a big deal. There's no customization to speak of. There is customization for one of the buttons and, well, there's not much, but it's got all the controls you need. The only thing I wish they had added was wind noise reduction, which this has. Again, I'll cover that in just a minute, but I wish they could bind that to one of the keys. You can't. What's interesting though is the safe volume option. I know it sounds boring, but it is particularly important because just like Apple has done with their new version of AirPods Pro and their new iOS, it's got a decibel meter. It will tell you not your outside noise, but it'll tell you how loud you're playing your media. And that is particularly important. With headphones, I can see how you might want to blast these at 110 dB. You probably shouldn't. But Soundcore has your back because they allow you not only to monitor it, but also to limit it, starting from 75 dB to 100 dB. Sorry, quick break. I don't have any Christmas presents, but the best Christmas present a YouTuber can get is a subscribe. So could you, wow, that is so lame, but could you hit the subscribe button anyway? Thank you. I know it's lame. I still want it. Now, before we get on to the sound quality section and get into the meat and potatoes of this thing, I'll also mention that it has an auxiliary in headphone jack and a USB-C slot. Now, the USB-C slot does not work for anything except charging, which is a bit of a shame. All of these devices have onboard digital to audio converters, basically sound cards, right, that are dedicated to sound quality, as opposed to your laptop's sound card, which is just a little add-on. So this will be better at its job than the laptop will. I wish they'd included the ability to use USB-C to transmit digital audio via the wire, so very high resolution, and use the onboard sound card, but apparently you have to go all the way up to the focal Bathurst for that sort of thing. Nonetheless, the auxiliary in works just fine. You can have the auxiliary in connected, you can have ANC on, and you can have your high-res audio, and it'll be absolutely brilliant because you'll save a bit of battery as well. What you cannot do is have this running on the auxiliary cable and have it connected via Bluetooth to some other device. If you're trying to hack the multi-point system that way, it's not going to work. Which brings us to the sound quality. First, let's talk about ANC and transparency mode, and then we'll get to the good stuff. Now, ANC is fantastic with a caveat. Two caveats actually. Number one, it is highly dependent on how good the seal is on your head, which is why I was stressing so much on how to get a good seal. Once you get a good seal, the ANC is fantastic. If you don't get a good seal, you can noticeably and audibly tell the difference. Nonetheless, like I said, once you get it right, the ANC is so good, it's not going to go up against the best. The Boses and the AirPods Maxes of the world are, yeah, they are next level. But it's good enough that you will not be wanting more for quite a while. Now, the other caveat is that they exert quite a bit of pressure. I'm not talking about the clamp force this time. I'm talking about the ANC themselves give you the feeling of pressure in your ear, which is a little bit unpleasant. Now, I get used to it, but if that's unpleasant for you, you can tone it down in the menu. Or you could set it on auto noise cancellation. What that does is it reduces the amount of ANC depending on what it senses in your outside environment. Not so much that it's ineffective, but enough that it relieves the pressure. I find it to be actually a pretty decent compromise, and you can always bump it back up to max in the app if you choose to. Now, transparency, on the other hand, does allow everything else in, but it also boosts certain frequencies really a bit too much. It gets very fatiguing, and to be fair, the transparency mode, just like the active noise cancellation, has 5 levels of customization. My recommendation is use level 1 or 2 for the most natural sounding transparency. Now, while we're on the topic of ANC and transparency, wind noise reduction is also a feature that the Soundcore Q45 offers. Wind noise reduction actually works pretty well in my testing. There's only one downside. When you need wind noise reduction, usually you just need it quickly. You can't do that. You can't bind wind noise reduction to anything. The same thing goes for ANC. If you want to switch out of adaptive ANC and go into full active noise cancellation, I wish that could be bound to one of the buttons. You have to use the app. Now, that being said, you don't have to use the app for sound quality, or do you? Actually, you might have to. Let me explain. Now, this is a V-shaped frequency response curve. What does that mean? It means that Soundcore does what Soundcore always does. They boost the bass a lot, and they boost the treble a lot. And the resulting sound is arguably a fun sound, but in my opinion, it is a deeply flawed sound. Let me explain. When you boost the bass, there is the mid bass and there's the low end rumble, the sub bass. This has a lot of both, but it has a particularly accentuated sub bass. And what that does is, well, everything sounds very rumbly, and that can induce a little bit of nausea. At least for me, I might be a little more sensitive to it, but it's just a bit too much. They could have reined it in a little bit. The mid-range, well, I could complain about it, but I'm not going to, because it's a V-shaped frequency response, and usually that comes with a lot of things. I will, however, complain about the upper mids. Between the 2 and 4 kilohertz region is usually where you get a lot of vocal presence, and that is exactly where this thing should excel. And it doesn't. There's actually a big crater, a big hole there, and those frequencies actually sound recessed. So a lot of female frequencies will sound a little further back into the mix. It won't sound like that because of the treble, but we'll get to that in just a second. I think they could have definitely added a little more energy. I mean, they've added energy everywhere else. They may as well have bumped up those upper mids a little bit. And that brings me to the treble. You might not notice the lack of upper mids because the treble has been boosted. And I don't know how else to say this, but I think we should burn it to the ground and start over, because this is just way too much treble. Everything just gets piercingly loud. It doesn't get harsh or sibilant, to be fair, mostly, but it's just too much. all the time. Things don't need to sound so brittle and glassy all the time, and things certainly don't need to sound so darn sharp, way out of balance. And that is the one criticism I have of the Soundcore Q45, which is in contrast with their A40. That one sounds like it's absolutely dead. This one sounds like it's a little too alive. I think Soundcore is just figuring it out still. Nonetheless, you can EQ it. They come with a lot of EQs out of the box that's in the app, and they do seem to work to some extent, but none of them really fix the flaws. The one redeeming factor though is that you can use one of those EQ profiles as a starting point. That's a really cool thing. Go to flat, use that as a starting point, and then tweak it further. Bring everything between 4 and 8 kilohertz down, and honestly some of the treble itself, just bring it down. Unfortunately, the EQ on the app, as nice as it is, isn't granular enough to actually fix all the issues. So I found myself having to resort to using a third-party application, in my case Wavelet, to try and rein it in. And still, I think if you want to finesse it, there's a lot of work to be done with EQ. But I am willing to bet a lot of people will look past that and just say that this is a very fun sound, because it is a very fun sound. It's just a little too unbalanced and unfinessed for the audiophile in me. Oh, and by the way, I will put the EQ profiles up on my Discord, so feel free to join the Discord channel. Links in the description and the pinned comment, and I'll see you there. Now, before we wrap things up, let's just talk about battery life. I'll just put the number up. I haven't tested it to its fullest extent, but 5 minutes of charge will give you 4 hours of battery. Honestly, I would just run it on that. This thing has a phenomenal battery life with or without ANC on, and with LDAC on as well. It is fantastic. There is just one thing to keep in mind. There is no in-ear detection. I mean, apart from certain things like you can't just put these on to accept a call because it doesn't know it's on your head. Also, if you take them off while you're playing music or any kind of media, well, it continues to play it and it continues to run down on the battery. So that is something to keep in mind. To be fair though, if there's no media playing, if it's just got ANC on, I found that the battery did not go down very quick. I mean, it took ages for the battery to run down. So I don't think this is actually an issue. It's just something to be aware of. So let's round it up. What do we have here? We've got... Nearly forgot. Microphone check. This is the microphone quality check of the Soundcore Space Q45. Very quiet conditions. What do you think? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it really bad? I don't know. It's probably pretty decent. These guys do a pretty good job. But this is the same thing with a lot of background noise. Cafe sounds played at very loud volumes. What do you think it does? I'm going to move my head around so the noise hits the microphone in different directions, and I'm going to keep talking for your benefit. I got you. So let's round it up. What do we have here? We've got a $150 headphone that gives you Bluetooth, obviously, with LDAC and multi-point, and an ANC level that far exceeds expectations. Add to that the extremely premium quality of build, and you've got yourself a proper contender for things that are far more expensive than $150. The lack of in-ear detection is a little bit of a downside, but honestly, I would nitpick on the sound quality a little bit more just because there's a lack of balance. Still, an extremely fun sound on an extremely well-built headphone with surprisingly good levels of active noise cancellation for under $150. $100 if you get one of those deals like Black Friday and Cyber Monday, and this is well worth more than you're paying for it. Ladies and gentlemen, the Soundcore Q45. Stay happy, stay peaceful, stay colorful. Namaste.